Dr. Venezis obviously enjoyed his hour or so with those students at Merewether who are studying Greek from Year 7 right through to Year 12. They met in the library, where the High Commissioner and Year 11 girl Maria Stelianos exchanged gifts. Hers, school mementos, his, books on the history, politics and customs of Cyprus. And it was on those subjects that Dr. Venezis addressed the students. He has been High Commissioner in Canberra for 5 years now and says he relished the opportunity to accept an invitation to tour this region.
It's a place where we have a thriving Greek community, and the Cypriot community, of course, is part and parcel of the Greek community here. We have no different community. They are all together, they working together. And especially, they have no differences when it comes to national problems.
Over the weekend, Dr. Venezis will visit the vineyards and attend the Holy Apostles' Church at Hamilton. His stay will be highlighted by the 23rd Annual Hellenic Ball at the Workers' Club on Sunday night.
The majestic two-masted brigantine spent the past 3 days berthed at Lee Wharf, allowing hundreds of enthusiasts to take a closer look at a floating piece of navigational history. Following the original course taken by the First Fleet, the crew of 35 set sail from Cowes and the Isle of Wight on a 90-day journey to the first Australian port of call, Fremantle, before heading to Newcastle. 24 young people from both England and Australia were chosen from 7,000 applicants to sail on board the $6 million Bicentennial gift. As the young Endeavour gracefully sailed out of Newcastle Harbour yesterday, hundreds of well-wishers turned out to bid farewell, both on and off the shore. Another Bicentennial project, the locally built replica of Australia's first steamship, escorted the larger vessel through the heads. The William IV also took the opportunity to continue sea trials. It will officially set sail later this month. The young Endeavour is now on her way to Brisbane before taking part in the tall ships race from Hobart to Sydney. Although she'll be handed over to Australia on the 25th of January, her biggest day will no doubt be when she'll lead the flotilla of tall ships into Sydney Harbour for one of the biggest bicentennial celebrations of all.
Just under 18,000 cricket fans made the pilgrimage to the #1 Sportsground to see the Shield match between New South Wales and Queensland. That crowd is the biggest to have attended a Shield game this season, even though the game didn't go into a fourth day. Newcastle Cricket Association Secretary Dennis Broad says he's certain Newcastle will get another top match next season.
I think after the success of this game, the New South Wales officials will certainly have one here next season. We had an assurance during the game that the new SCG Trust Agreement, which is for 7 years, that one game can be played outside Sydney each season.
Would you expect if we were to get another game next year that it would be a game of the calibre of this one?
Well, they'd be silly not to. You know, Western Australia have never been to Newcastle, so we'd welcome them, and I think we welcome Queensland back again with folks like, you know, Ian Botham's here for 3 years, and of course Alan Border and Robbie Kerr, they'd be keen to come back after both scoring a century at the weekend.
The Newcastle Cricket Association celebrates its centenary next year, and Mr Broad says locals may get a one-day international this time next year, as well as the Sheffield Shield match.
Well, it's the Newcastle centenary next year, and we have applied for a one-day international, and you know, we're hopeful that perhaps the West Indies versus Australia might be here.
Last month, Varley's, Ganninans and Alco Steel announced they teamed with the Bond Corporation, Hyundai, ANZAC Technologies and TNT to bid for the contract to build 12 frigates for the Australian and New Zealand navies. Their plan is to use the Dyke Peninsula on Newcastle Harbour to develop a shipbuilding facility which would cost upwards of $100 million. The second group to register its interest wants to use the Carrington Slipways facility at Tomago, as well as the harbour site, for the extensive construction, fit-out and trial of the ships. The new group, called Australian Warship Systems, in this document presented to the Department of Defence today, is making capital of the fact that all three participants in the group have extensive records as efficient suppliers to the Australian Navy.
Each have a dedicated scope of work in that ANI will do the integrated logistics support, all the design responses to and spare parts, training and that sort of thing. Carrington Slipways will build the ships and AWA will do the weapons and electronics.
By the end of December, the government plans to announce a shortlist of 2 prime contractors. The Williamstown Dockyard in Victoria is a front-runner, with one of the Newcastle consortiums tipped to take the other spot. They'll then pair with 2 design houses from overseas, with tenders expected to close at the end of next year. Will 2 Newcastle consortiums then work against our local chances?
I don't think so, John. I think it's good that we do have 2 strong consortiums competing for the honour of being the other prime contractor.
In tonight's news at 6, a quick-thinking off-duty policeman from Raymond Terrace arrests a man wanted on rape charges. The policeman was in Newcastle doing his Christmas shopping when he spotted the man in King Street.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
The Newcastle Businessman's annual presentation is now coming to the end of its first decade, and receiving the award is regarded as a significant tribute. Club President Bill Rock said this year's winner represented an achiever not only in business but also in his contribution to society. Richard Owens is best known for turning a local food chain into a $220 million a year industry spread throughout the state. Chewies food barns employ 1,500 people, and there's a dynamic training and recruitment program operating in the Hunter district. But Richard Owens is also a patron of the arts, known for bringing the Australian Opera to Newcastle to support the local orchestra in a joint performance of the opera La Bohème. Richard says he's not resting on his laurels, now he's looking at the Civic Theatre itself.
For many years I've sat in the Civic Theatre, I've said it's a beautiful theatre. It's one of those theatres that should be retained, and obviously the heritage people have said yes, it must be retained. But these principal singers have told us that it's probably the best theatre in Australia as far as balance between what's on stage and an orchestra. And when you think about it, probably the theatre really does need restoration.
The strike by country doctors in the Upper Hunter and Coldfields area is really starting to bite. It's put considerable strain on Maitland Hospital during the peak times, such as Friday, Saturday and Sunday nights in casualty. And according to the chairman of the Lower Hunter Area Health Service, Ken Guy, at times they've had trouble finding beds for the extra patients. He says it highlights the need for upgrading Maitland Hospital. The hospital has just announced plans to spend $31 million over 8 years upgrading the institution into a major district hospital. But the plan is far from certain and depends heavily on state government funding.
Unfortunately, it's a bill that possibly may go into about $40 million. It is going to be a necessity for Maitland Hospital. We are a sub-regional hospital, and I think the people of our area deserve the treatment and the facilities to be able to obtain that without travelling.
If the plan does come to fruition, it would mean hospital beds would increase from 134 to 182. Operating suites would be upgraded and accident and emergency facilities would be radically improved.
Constable First Class Wayne Humphrey of Raymond Terrace was in Newcastle with his wife doing some Christmas shopping. It was after having lunch at the Pizza Hut in King Street that Mr Humphrey saw a 34-year-old man wanted by police for failing to appear in Maitland Court after being committed for trial on sexual assault charges.
Unfortunately doing a bit of Christmas shopping with the wife and walked into him in King Street. And subsequently it's been a foot chase. A number of local residents here did a top job and helped me. We've caught him in here at Burwood and Hunter Street.
He put up a fight?
Yeah, there was a bit of a struggle in 2 or 3 places, one under a block of office block up in King Street where I've chased him. He's not exactly the most helpful prisoner I've ever arrested, no.
You're glad to get him back into custody?
Yeah, it is a good feeling to get him back in, there's no doubt about that. We have been after him for some time. I consider him to be fairly dangerous, but today we've got him without too much trouble.
A real bit of good luck, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, I suppose you'd say it was good luck.
The 34-year-old Raymond Terrace man appeared in Newcastle Court late this afternoon, charged with failing to appear.
The state opposition leader began the local election campaign by launching a scathing attack on what he described as the Labor government's monopoly of political power in the traditional safe seats of the Hunter. The 10 endorsed Newcastle and Lower Hunter candidates are Linda Donovan, representing Swansea, Alderman Graham Dunkley, Maitland, Alderman Peter Wilson, Wallsend. In the Lake Macquarie seat, Val Saunders, MLC Virginia Chadwick, Newcastle candidate Alderman Ashley Saunders, Ian Crook, representing Wyong, and Judith Lloyd, vying for the seat of Charlestown. Absent from last night's campaign launch was Bob Scott, candidate for the new seat of Port Stephens. Mr Greiner says he believes Labor voters are deserting the party, and it's now up to the Liberals to push for a change for the better, the theme behind the Liberal campaign. Among the issues of the environment, sewage rates and the local economy, Mr Greiner says the Liberal Party has regional plans for the troubled mining industry.
All a government can do for the coal mining industry anywhere is to reduce the on-cost, basically rail freight and port charges. Now, to do that, you've really got to be prepared to say, we've been ripping you off for a long time, we're prepared on a short-term basis while the world markets are down to give you some of that back in order to keep the mines going.
The boundary changes after the federal election resulted in an increase of 10 new electorates, a jump from 99 to 119 seats. Although there were some drastic changes in this region, the Liberals are confident the votes will swing their way.
I suspect there might be a percentage or two difference in Charlestown, making it a little less marginal. It has created, of course, a very interesting situation in Port Stephens, an area where I think we have a chance. And it has also created what has been a long dream of mine, a possibility for us on the western side of Lake Macquarie. And that's where I'm delighted that someone like Val, with her...
The Urban Transit Authority says it will operate the Newcastle ferries from Queen's Wharf when it opens next year. But that raises questions about what to do with the existing terminal, just 6 years old. We examine the Queen's Wharf development in a report tonight.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
Take half a dozen Year 10 students, all with the gift of the gab, and you have the makings of a lively discussion. Organisers of the state final were not disappointed. The topic, that man's best friend is himself.
Ladies and gentlemen, don't let yourselves be overwhelmed by all the news of bad things in the world. There's much goodwill in the world and the potential to do much good in humankind.
On the affirmative team were Rachel Van Zanten, Nathan Bunt and Emma Clarence. Arguing the negative case were Douglas Jenkin, Nicky Barbic and Tom Hardy. The debaters who argued their way to the final over the past 2 days are all from different schools in Sydney. Both teams presented strong cases, using examples such as Bob Geldof's campaign for famine relief and the nuclear arms race to illustrate both cases. But the negative team proved the most argumentative, winning the debate and clinching the state final. Nikki Barbic was named Best Debater of the series.
A huge assumption on their part to make this statement.
The exhibition is the culmination of a minimum 3 years' work by students graduating from the college's Bachelor of Visual Arts and Education courses. The works on display cover 7 specialisations: painting, printmaking, sculpture, ceramics, textiles, photography and illustration. The next step for students is to find work. This exhibition is understandably considered a showpiece of talent and an important vehicle for launching new artists. Many graduates are employed as teachers. Print and textile specialists are finding work with community-based projects. Plant and wildlife illustrators, photographers and ceramics experts are also in demand. In the traditional fine arts, such as painting and sculpture, graduates face a tougher challenge, but the college is confident most will succeed. Exhibition 87 will officially open tonight at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, don't worry.
The National Association for Prevention of Child Abuse and Neglect, NABCAN for short, officially started its huge task in Newcastle at this businesswomen's dinner last night. NABCAN has the support of some of Australia's leading campaigners against child abuse, including guest speakers at last night's dinner, such as founder of the Child Abuse Prevention Service, Dorothy Ginn. Others, including a professor with Camperdown Children's Hospital, Kim Oakes, and director of the In Search program for adolescents, Ron Barr, also there to support NABCAN. Co-founder Rosemary Sinclair says the association will act as an umbrella group to coordinate the work of many others already at work in the community.
We know something needs to be done about the problem of child abuse because we earnestly believe that the majority of crimes in the country have their genesis in the home environment. So we want to encourage better care of children, more effective care of children. We want to encourage the general community to be more aware of the rights and needs of children, and in an increasingly selfish society, currently that situation doesn't prevail.
Newcastle is one of the first cities to open its doors to NABCAN, but Federal Committee member Tony Holly says the need here is pressing.
Newcastle is supposed to have the highest per capita of child abuse in New South Wales, so yes, it is particularly relevant.
The resident of this flat on Brook Street reported smoke billowing from his room just before 8 o'clock last night. First fire units took less than a minute to arrive and were quickly backed up by others. Aware that the flat was all but lost, the firefighters battled to prevent 3 adjoining units also going up in flames. Within minutes they were satisfied the fire was under control and that no one had been in the burnt-out unit. Although no residents were hurt, at least one fireman suffered minor burns and cuts which later required hospital treatment. Most of the fire was limited to a sleeping area, but the rest of the flat was extensively damaged by smoke and water. The repair bill is likely to be well in excess of $20,000, but the good news is that the other flats escaped unscathed. Detailed inquiries into the cause of the fire will start today, but already firemen are speculating that a discarded cigarette butt is the most likely culprit. The Salvation Army has arranged for emergency accommodation for the tenant, a man in his mid-20s.
Tonight we'll bring you the story of the dramatic increase in child sexual assaults in the Hunter. According to police, the rise may be partly attributed to an increase in the reporting of such crimes.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
In tonight's news, worried residents of Broadmeadow say their safety could be threatened if the Department of Health scheme for psychiatric patients is allowed to go ahead in their street. The scheme is part of the state government's plan to de-institutionalise mental health care.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
In a move to scale down the state's mental health institutional care system, the government is planning to send hundreds of patients back into the community through the Richmond Rehabilitation Program. One of the houses earmarked in the local district by the Department of Health is number 43 Brunker Road at Broadmeadow. The house is now unoccupied but has for many years served as an Aboriginal hostel. But by early next year, 30 patients described as seriously mentally ill, which includes schizophrenics and manic depressives, will move into their new home, much to the alarm of nearby neighbours. The residents say they're not against mental patients living in a community if they can cope. But with the state government's plans to close down major mental institutions across the state, it's the screening and supervision procedures now in use that has the neighbours worried about their safety.
As we've seen from recent newspaper articles, screening procedures have failed to some extent in Sydney, also here in the release of a young woman from Morisset who had attacked one of the nurses with a knife.
The residents say their area has its quota of welfare institutions. Up the road is a halfway house and the Warramai Children's Court and the Methadone Clinic are also nearby. The neighbours say they've been left in the dark by the Health Department as to the exact running of the centre, one that will need community support if it's going to succeed.
They will have that support as long as we can see that what is going on measures up to what we think is good supervision and good screening of people coming there.
A Department of Health spokesman was not available this afternoon for comment on the issue.
Resources Minister Peter Morris has announced a $100,000 grant to help the CSIRO in its battle against alligator weed. The weed first arrived in Australia from ships at Newcastle more than 50 years ago, but now has the potential to cripple multi-million-dollar rural industries.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
Good afternoon, I'm Belinda Borissow. For the first time, Singleton is holding the Army Sport Parachute Association's National Championships. We'll bring you a full report on that tonight.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.